Yeah. And most people that I see, especially for pain stuff, they'll be like, I told my doctor I was in pain and they just told me to take 3 ibuprofens 4 times a day or something like that. And they're like, well, I don't want to do that. But there were no other options. They didn't give me any other options. So it's definitely something I see a lot. And so many, we're in a day and age where I think it's like 130 people die a day from opioid overdose. So there's like no better time for an alternative like this that has been proven effective through clinical studies, through scientific studies, which I know is really important for people to see that it is backed by science.
What y'all listening to?
Limelight Highlight Podcast.
Welcome back to Limelight Highlight, where we highlight individuals tackling everyday problems you thought couldn't be solved. I'm your host, Jonathan Rosario, and what you just heard is a clip from today's episode where I'm joined by Raegan Lima, who is a doctor of traditional Chinese medicine. We have a great episode full of useful information on how the modern Western practices in health differ from that of the traditional Chinese medicine. And quick disclaimer, this podcast was recorded back before I went on that long hiatus. So if we mention some things that have already happened a while ago or at the beginning of the year, then that's why. Regardless of when this podcast took place and when it was recorded, we talk about a lot of the things that are as relevant today as any, and seeing how we're still dealing with this pandemic and most of the things we're dealing with today are still revolving around health. It's still a relevant podcast. It's still a relevant topic, and everything we touch on is nothing's changed much. Since we're moving to a newer, more upgraded format, I just want to let you know that I will continue to do fun facts, but now these will be 100% related to the topic and not the unrelated fun facts that you're used to. So I may have said this previously just during conversation, and I may say during the show in the interview, but here it is to be highlighted. Since this episode is all about health and we talk on different aspects of it, and I just wanted to touch on how we're all sold pills or prescription drugs, from commercials to going to your local practitioners and getting something prescribed for our ailments, to even the person on the street. Kind of just our streets are ridden with drugs. Well, here's your fun fact, yet kind of disturbing fact. There are only 2 countries in the world that allow pharmaceutical drugs to be advertised on TV and media. One being New Zealand, and the other being, surprise, surprise, the United States of America. I personally don't think that's a good thing, but listen to the episode, come up with your own conclusion, and enjoy this episode. We touch on a ton of topics, as I said before. I think I rambled on long enough. So without further ado, welcome Raegan Lima to the show. Enjoy. So you are an apparent wizard in traditional Chinese medicine. Yeah, I just wanted to get you on the podcast. Kind of the topic of today's show and the month it is going to come out in March is kind of a year in review, because that's when March kind of COVID hit everything in March of last year. And, you, from what I got from you, is you started your practice in May of 2020, which is right after COVID.
I did.
So
yeah,
you are a doctor of traditional Chinese medicine. You have your own practice called Lima's Acupuncture and Herbal Center. Now, what I want to do is talk about that and talk about a little more on how you got into this role.
Yeah, definitely. So growing up as a kid, I had 2 parents that were pharmacists. So also both business owners. So kind of entrepreneurship runs in the family, but also being immersed in the medical field and the medical world. I kind of grew up as a kid, always knowing that I wanted to be of service to people, help people, and always had a fond love of medicine. So I knew that I wanted to go into medicine, but it took me some time to figure out exactly what medicine it was. At first, it was pharmacy, of course, idolizing my parents, and then it turned into being a doctor or a nurse, an obstetrician at one point. And as I was going through kind of doing my undergrad for biology, preparing to go into the Western medical field, I just kind of figured out that that wasn't the route that I wanted to go. I knew I wanted to go into medicine, but I didn't want to go into Western medicine. I wanted to find a medicine that really encompassed more than just the physical, but also the mental, the emotional, the spiritual aspects of health. And it took me, I changed my major a couple times. And it was actually through one of those majors, an anthropology major, that I was doing a class for cultural anthropology, and we were doing a project on health throughout human history and healthcare and what that's looked like for different cultures and stuff. And I learned about Chinese medicine, and I just was instantly, it was like a light bulb moment. I was like, that's what I want to do. And very serendipitously, there was already a school where I was going to doing my undergrad in Santa Cruz. There was already a school there, 5 branches that I found. And it was, 5 miles down the road from me. And I was like, okay, if this isn't a sign, I don't know what is. So it all worked out really well. And that's kind of how I got into it and fell in love after that. The more I learned about it, the more I fell in love with it, really.
And how does traditional Chinese medicine differ from Western medicine?
Yeah, it differs in a lot of different ways, and it's kind of hard to compare the two. Honestly, they both have been kind of evolving out of completely different time periods, different cultures, but it's different mainly in that TCM doctors started out working about 2000. In written history, it came out about 2,300 years ago. So it's been evolving for a long time throughout cultural changes, wars, and so many different influences. And it really kind of evolved from the people observing nature and natural processes, things like season changes, natural phenomenon, animals, all these different things, and applying it to the human body as a microcosm of nature, as we are part of nature. And that's really the base of it, of how it began and how it evolved. Western medicine, in contrast, kind of more focuses on isolating symptoms and treating those symptoms by manipulating like internal mechanisms that created those symptoms, either through blocking signals or amplifying signals in order to achieve an end result, which is to get rid of the symptoms. And, these differences, they don't make one better or worse by any means. They both have their strong suits. They both have their weaknesses. But it's always been my opinion that the collaboration of them ultimately would be the most beneficial for the people who are in need of help, and I think we're still working on that. We're still getting there for sure, but it's constantly growing and constantly changing. So I'm hopeful for the future that that'll be a more commonplace.
Well, that's why it's called a practice, right?
Exactly. It's exactly why. We're always practicing. We're always learning.
And what are some of the more popular kind of things that, like, what's one of the mainstream treatments of Chinese traditional medicine that people are familiar with, like, today?
Yeah. So traditional Chinese medicine encompasses 5 major branches. The first one is acupuncture, which I think is the most known for, most used. But it also encompasses a lot of other things that people don't usually know about. So some of those other things are going to be herbal medicine, myofascial release techniques such as cupping or gua sha. I know cupping, especially recently, has become pretty big, especially in the sports medicine world, and as well as diet and nutrition, lifestyle factors. That's a huge aspect of the medicine, and teaching people how to be healthy through their lifestyle. And lastly, energetic medicine like Qigong can also be used as a form of medicine as well. So those are the 5 major branches. I think most notably by the public, if they know about traditional Chinese medicine at all, it's going to be either through acupuncture or through cupping or through gua sha, which has really become big recently in kind of the beauty industry world for wrinkles and such.
Gotcha.
But yeah, those are the most common. I think herbal medicine too probably is a pretty common one too. But different practitioners really hone their preferences, their interests, and kind of roll with it. It kind of just grows from there. But those are the main tools that encompass traditional Chinese medicine.
And what was that last one you said? Qigong?
Qigong, yeah, medical Qigong.
And what exactly is that?
Yeah, so Qigong, it translates roughly as the cultivation of life force energy. So, there's a lot of different lineages, but they all revolve around similar basics that utilize energy either for either storing it in the body or, visualization techniques or what different like meditative techniques, movements, all of which cultivate energy in our organs and target different organs and are used for specific purposes for healing the body.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you ever get or not confused, but do people ever like conflate it with like crystal healing and like Reiki and things of those natures, where some people kind of scoff at it, but also like there is that placebo effect where if you feel like it does work, then it does?
Yeah, definitely. I think they're very commonly lumped in together. I think normally that's because someone who's interested in a more esoteric form of medicine like traditional Chinese medicine probably also is interested in things like Reiki or crystal healing, chakras, that kind of stuff. So I think they very commonly go hand in hand, but not always. There's definitely those practitioners that are very science-based oriented, and that's what's most important and held above all, for sure. It just depends person to person, really, and every practitioner is going to do it a little bit differently.
So speaking of practices and practitioners, you started your practice right after COVID hit pretty hard. What was the thought process on that? Was it like an optimistic view where you're like, maybe it'll go away in just, a little bit, or how does that work? And, a lot of businesses kind of fell out. So what was the thought process behind you just deciding to do that at almost, I wouldn't even say peak of COVID, but
Right when it hit. Yeah. I'd been going to school for almost 8 years at this point. So I was pretty chomping at the bit to begin my practice, begin my career, step into more of this like adulthood phase of my life and transcend beyond like the college years and all that. And I studied right out of school to get my license as quick as possible because I have to take licensing exam like most professions. And I really wanted to get it going. And I know, COVID hit and it wasn't any aspect of me not taking it seriously. I didn't think too much about it. I had no idea. I mean, at the time, I don't think any of us thought it was going to last as long as it has. But ultimately, I had no idea. And my thought process really was, I'm not going to let it stop me, first of all. Second of all, it is a medicine that excels greatly at treating upper respiratory infections, and it's needed. We need as many treatments as we can to try to attack this thing, and so why not offer this medicine as a tool for people to be able to utilize it as well. I know a lot of practitioners actually ended up closing their practices just because of kind of that interaction with the public, but my thought process was far more on the side of this is part of my job. I'm in the front lines too, in a sense, not in the same way as nurses, but I see patients and I help them with their health problems, and this is just another health problem that we got to face. So that's kind of where I was thinking with it all, and I don't have any regrets, honestly. I don't.
Well, that's good. And from when it started, like when you started your practice to today, we've had, especially in California, we've had lockdowns to restrictions kind of lightening up to going right back down, this roller coaster effect. Has that affected your practice at all? And if so, what are some of the main points and any fears that came out of this